listeners and readers of AwardsWatch.com. This is the Awards Watch Podcast, episode 260. I'm your executive editor, Ryan McQuade, and joining me today is Josh Parham.
Hello, hello.
It's just me and Josh. It's one of those classic just me and Josh episodes.
Nobody wanted to talk.
Nobody wanted to talk this week. We were like, anybody? Hello out there. Well, I think everyone's recovering from the retrospective we did last week.
Right, yes.
Let's do that. Is that fair to say? I mean, those are pretty hard.
Intensive. They are, yeah.
But usually, I will say, after the episodes, Josh, after a retrospective, it does end up just being you and me for the most part. So that is great. But yeah, I mean, obviously, news outside of the film world this past week, it's been a tough pill to swallow, and it's been a lot to take in, and so I understand maybe not everyone wanting to come into a podcast this week. Also, everybody else is busy. It's a crazy time in November for, like, I don't know if you're getting the emails I'm getting, Josh, but there's
a
lot of interviews and a lot of screenings and a lot of movies that are premiering, and just
stuff to hit before deadlines when
exactly.
Like, critics start voting. So yeah, because it's always busy.
Because the critics groups are going to start doing things here soon. Next week, we're going to do with the team here. We're going to do kind of where we're at in the Oscar race, for a week and talk with you guys and editors, and everybody's going to try to come on. Hopefully we can get as many voices on as possible, kind of have a big State of the Union, no pun intended politically, for the Oscar race and where we're at, because we are going to start hitting critics groups and we're going to start getting Golden Globe nominations and indie spirits and all those things right before we start hitting how the industry is looking. But right now we're also in the midst of a ton of movies releasing, and doing well or marginally well at the box office. So we had Conclave just come out, and Conclave's been doing really well. So is The Substance. We've been hearing a lot of great things about The Substance, and it's like,
the boomers especially, though, they have really come out for Conclave.
Really, really not surprising.
No, I mean, that is their audience, but it's just been. That's also been a crowd that's a little spotty lately. They haven't been showing up as much as a lot of people thought. But Conclave really appealing. Like, I remember I saw that movie, nearly sold out crowd, and it very much leaned towards that demographic in terms of who was watching it.
Very timely. Also, an election, the Pope electing a Pope. Very smart of focus to release it then. Helps its Oscar chances. We're not here to talk about Conclave. We're here to talk about Steve McQueen's Blitz and the new A24 film Heretic, which had come out this weekend. But that was a movie that came out last weekend. It bumped up in terms of its schedule. It's now probably wider, even more this weekend. And it's doing really well for itself and also positioning itself perfectly right now within the Oscar race. That's Conclave. But Josh, we're here to talk about Blitz first, which is Steve McQueen's new film. This has been, would you say, Josh, this is the movie that we've penciled in as the sight unseen frontrunner for a while? Like how we had in the past with like a Killers of the Flower Moon or like a Fablemans, or like Steve McQueen got the honorary one this year where he was sight unseen making a big war movie about the Blitz in London, and he got that kind of nod early on.
Yeah, I mean, definitely was for me. That was the movie I had at my number one in Best Picture. And as usually is the case, it's not really like, do I really think this is going to win? Probably not, but it sounds the most good on paper. And when everything is sight unseen, you just go with what sounds good on paper, knowing that that will more than likely be changed in the future. So, yeah, I think early on it sounded like, yeah, this could be one that could go all the way.
It's a very safe choice. That's what it really
Exactly.
is. It's a safe choice. Sometimes being safe early on is okay. You can't.
Yeah, because it's like June or something. You haven't seen anything.
I think people like the ones that get something right all the way from July. It takes a certain. You have to have a feeling, I guess. When people were doing everything everywhere all at once, or like myself and some others were like Oppenheimer all the way last year. Like, but most people have the head on straight and put the sort of safest pick up there, and this was definitely it. premiered in London, premiered at the New York Film Festival, had its sort of run at the regional festivals. I was able to catch it at the Middleburg Film Festival. I believe you saw it. Did you just see it regular Chicago
Uh,
screening,
I
or
just
was
had
it?
a critic screening. It
Okay,
was screening at the Chicago Film Festival, but I
okay,
think it was competing with something else, and I
okay.
couldn't make it.
And
I
you
think
went
it
to
actually
the
was competing with the Brutalists. So
okay. Well,
yeah,
you
between
went.
those two, I was gonna
I
pick
think you went to
Brutalists.
the better film. And I think you might agree with that as well. Um, Josh, let's talk about it. First off, before we even get into Blitz, I don't think you and I have actually ever talked about Steve McQueen and what you think of him as a director, what you like about him, your sort of favorite films from him, maybe some least favorites, because I know that there are some polarizing films in his filmography. So what do you think of Steve McQueen just as a filmmaker?
I love Steve McQueen as a filmmaker. I think that what he is really able to do so well that I very much respond to is that I think he can find these very, if not important, but just very like introspective topics to go into, but he's able to also then bring a level of artistry to it that makes it beautiful in a way, even though he could be talking about very dark things, but there's an alluring quality that I think he infuses in that material that I find so captivating. And I think that his filmography, sometimes it isn't all like masterpieces. Like I would call 12 Years a Slave a masterpiece. I do think that is an incredible piece of work. Hunger to a certain degree as well. But like Shame, I think that's a movie where there's some good things in it. There's some bad things, but I love the way that he captures his character study. And Widows is also like one of the best Chicago movies ever. I give it a lot of points just for that. And I think what it has to say about not just, this crime story, but actual politics in this city is just incredible. Occupied City, not for me. I find that film to be a museum art piece that for some reason got major distribution. It
Yeah.
is it's not. I don't like Occupied City.
It's
I
still
like the
playing right
idea.
now, right?
Exactly.
And it's
I like
so
the idea
long.
behind it, but it literally feels like I'm walking into a museum and that would be playing like on the walls and people are just meant to walk in
Mhm.
and out. It's not a movie to me. And I know he has a like background in museum work, so it makes sense with that. I just don't find it to be a movie. It's not successful, but I do like him overall. I definitely think that he is a really, really great filmmaker with an eye of not only interesting stories, but good craft behind it to back it up.
Yeah, I think he's one of our strongest auteur cinema filmmakers. He makes very interesting, bold, harsh. But when I just recently talked to him, and the interview is up on the site for Blitz, and I'll separate the interview, which was a really great conversation with McQueen, with my thoughts here than when we do from the film because they're vastly different. Um, the one word that came to mind rewatching or looking back on his filmography and even looking at something like Blitz is meticulous. He's a very thoughtful, meticulous filmmaker. It goes back to even something like Occupied City, like you're talking about there. That is very much put together by somebody that has detailed research, thoughtfulness behind the subject matter that he is presenting, and whether that is presented in a very cold manner or a very entertaining manner, it is still very handsomely put together. And I think that Hunger is a really fascinating, beautiful debut. I think Shame, I agree with you, Josh. I really like Shame a lot. And I go back and forth with it on times because some aspects haven't aged particularly well. But then there's also I just think that the journey on a whole is too fascinating and too complex and too painfully beautiful enough to ignore. I mean, obviously, 12 Years a Slave kind of speaks for itself. And that whole experience of that Oscar season being such an important film, and really then sort of setting him apart from everybody else. Widows is one of my favorite films of the latter part of the 2010s. It was my favorite film at the time of 2018. It probably still is in my top five. I would not put it as my favorite. And over time you change, things change,
Sure.
you go back and forth between that and If Bill Street Could Talk, and you've got some really interesting films there. You mentioned Occupied City. I also would throw in Small Axe, which is really where the sort of point of origin for Blitz comes from, is the collection of really these British stories that he put together on Amazon that, if you believe the LA Film Critics Circle, is one film. But but is five films that I think kind of really encapsulate the good and the bad of Steve McQueen, because there are excellent chapters, thoughtful chapters inside of that. And then there's also, while detailed, still very meandering, just kind of like unnecessary chapters. Like the red, white, and blue John Boyega chapter is not my favorite of that. But then you talk about Mangrove, or um oh God, a little is it Lover's Rock,
Yes, yes.
which is incredible, like incredible stuff, like probably
Yeah.
some of the best of his career. Which then leads us to Blitz, which is he found this photograph of a young black boy in the midst of World War II in London during the Blitz. And what he told me was is that he found this story. He found the story in his mind based off of this photograph and kind of went from there. So that leads us to Blitz. And so, Josh, with all that said, what did you think of this film?
I thought it was fine, which feels pretty damning when you talk about a Steve McQueen movie. I think I
Yeah,
should expect more than just it was okay. The movie is very handsomely made for sure. Like as we have said, his attention to detail with the craft is absolutely stunning. And I don't take anything away from the movie on that front. And I think even the performances that we get for the most part are pretty engaging. Nothing I would say is like revolutionary, but I liked the roles that they had. I thought everybody was pretty good in their portrayals, but it also just sort of felt like to me this movie played it kind of safe. And it didn't feel like it had that much of a point of view to it outside of telling this like very, somewhat like kind of sweet-natured story of survival and but outside of that, I just felt like it was so lacking in any kind of momentum. And I was sort of shocked by how disinterested I kind of became of the narrative, and to the point where even when we get to the end of the movie, it felt very unsatisfying, even though there's supposed to be kind of this emotional catharsis, but it felt so muted to me. And I felt like that throughout much of this film. It felt very disconnected from the emotional core that it was trying to dig into, but actually showcasing it in an effective way. So it's not like the worst movie I've ever seen. It's not even all that terrible, but it's just bland to me. And that's nothing that I want to say when I'm describing a Steve McQueen movie. And that's the most disappointing thing, is that it just ended up being okay, but really nothing all that special, sadly.
it's a bit of a stuffy movie, isn't it? It's very old school, sort of British wartime filmmaking, and for better and for worse. He took a lot of inspiration when I talked to him of like sort of fairy tales and almost Dickens and
Yeah,
the
very
Brothers Grimm,
Dickensian. Yeah.
the Brothers Grimm, and sort of these old school stories to kind of navigate through this child's journey back home. And while there are things that, in talking with him, Josh, I was interested to find out sort of things that in the film that he showed, like obviously a black child's perspective during World War II, which is something that we rarely get to see um, in in cinema. And then obviously from his mother's perspective in the home front, and we've seen that before, but really the emphasis of these women and They're literally building the bombs that are being sent off to, to the men at war. And those are really kind of interesting ideas to kind of to explore and to examine, how the stuff being built at home is sent away to help destroy others. Like that's some really interesting
Yeah.
stuff that doesn't get fully explored because the melodrama is at the real heart of this family story. Obviously there's racial dynamics because um, you know, the child is of a mixed race, and his mother is played by Saoirse Ronan, and she's white, and his father dies he dies off camera essentially,
Yeah. Taken by the
and
police for
taken by the police
ultimate
very
reasons.
quickly,
Yeah.
like very much like how he did it in Widows, where with the son dying there in Widows, in the car, and that felt more appropriate because incidents like that with police can escalate very quickly like that, right? And in this case, it felt very rushed for story purposes. Um,
Well, even the kid's racial identity doesn't really get talked about that much. There's like one scene,
there
like a
was there,
flashback
well,
where
his
he's with
racial
his
identity,
friends.
gets get talked about with sort of the constable, police officer character in the film, very, very heavy-handedly, and it's to the point where he literally says, "I'm not black," and then he says later on, "I'm black." Like it's just very matter of fact, and
Yeah.
that's the subtlety that we have in this movie that is kind of really strange and different for Steve McQueen. It's a very broad film when it
Yes.
comes to that, which is not what has been successful for him. And I understand in terms of sound and the tech work in this movie, Josh, I would say it's still, I mean, he's working with his great sound team. He's working with Hans Zimmer and Nicholas Britell on this music and original songs.
And Adam Stackhausen did the production
Yep,
design,
which is
Oscar winner from
incredible.
Grand Budapest. Yep.
Yeah, and the movie is mostly well shot. There is a bunch of I can tell this is made by a streamer scenes, like particular like when the boys are on the train, early on, about 30 minutes in,
Yeah.
there's a train sequence. It felt so like uh and I say this with all respect, it didn't feel like Steve McQueen. It felt like Chris Columbus, who did the second Harry Potter movie, The Chamber of Secrets. It felt like a deleted scene out of that movie. There was like some moments that the sort of what's the best way to describe that, sort of like the shine or the glistening of a streamer
Yeah.
sort of was built in there, and it kind of took me out of certain sequences. And the Dickens-esque things in this, um with when it came to certain characters, like the Stephen Graham
Hmm.
section of this film, truly horrible stuff. Like some really bad acting there, in my opinion. And
Well,
but then there's
but I would even though say that that could have been a section that had the potential to be really interesting, but it just is like tonally, I think the movie doesn't really want to go in that kind of a direction. And so it feels like we're in this section of the movie that could be not fun, but as I said, more engaging, but it also feels kind of out of place at the same time. Like, yeah, those performances are very broad, but I feel like if there was a tone that hindered closer to that, I'd be okay with it. And there's a moment that kind of follows their introduction where they're in that nightclub. I
Mhm.
actually liked everything in the
Oh,
nightclub, not
that
to give
sequence
spoilers
is
away, but I
no.
think but like there's sort of a before and after with that location, and I loved both sections. I loved the before and the after. I thought it was really, really well done, but it also felt kind of segmented too,
Hmm.
which is also the nature of episodic storytelling. And one reason why I don't really like movies that are episodic, because it always feels like we're moving from location to location just because we have to, not because characters are actually motivated to move from those locations. And I think that's the problem with the storytelling here is and why it feels so segmented in these moments where even when it's good, there's no natural flow to the next set piece. And that did frustrate me a lot, even if there's individual moments that I thought were very engaging. They just didn't connect all that well for me.
I totally agree. Um, like I did think the stuff mostly outside of the very on the nose dialogue about racial identity, I did think the stuff about with the constable was some of the strongest parts of the episodic journey that George takes on. And I think Elliott Heffernan, who plays George, is actually really good. Like I think
Yeah.
he's a really good child actor, and
He's not
um,
precocious, which I really like.
no,
He doesn't
he's
feel like a movie kid. He feels very real and genuine.
yeah, and I think he's really great opposite Ronan, who I think could have used working with him more because um, Saoirse's in this weird place for me this year because I'm gonna go out on a limb. I'm just gonna say it. I don't think particularly either one of the performances she's given is a very interesting performance. I think the outrun, everyone's trying their best to like give her her flowers. And I think it's one of, if she gets nominated, it would be her worst nominated performance to date. For
I think
that,
it's a good performance in a very, very mediocre movie.
very mediocre movie, but also too like it's a by the numbers performance. Like it's
I mean,
there's
I
nothing
don't
about that.
necessarily disagree with that
You
either,
know what I mean?
but
Like
I
I've
also walk into most movies about alcoholics feeling like this is probably going to be very repetitive and a bit boring,
mhm.
and it kind of was. So, but I think she's good. But no, I
Well, I
would
mean
also not
it's
say that it was like her best performance either.
no, I mean like we've seen performances that depict sickness or illness before that feel repetitive, and then there's a performance that comes along and changes that. You know what I mean? I think a lot of like what I'm not comparing this, or I'm not saying that every performance has to be this, but there's a reason why then Anthony Hopkins in The Father comes along after we've seen illness and we've seen, dementia depicted so many times, and then it hits us kind of in the gut. You know what I mean? And so that performance isn't elevated because the script and the story and everything is so, for lack of a better term, it's very Irish and it's very much what it is, and it doesn't elevate beyond itself, and it's probably also a little too long. Here she is again, and I don't think that she's given quite the material that she we've known her to get, that she can elevate. I think she gives a fine performance, decent performance. She does the best she can with what she is given, which is essentially like, I'm a mom that abandoned my kid because during this war, and I'm sad about it, and I've got to put on a face, and then I want my son back. And that's really all we kind of get from her. It's a very
Yeah.
paint by number character. I think that she gives the of the two performances this year, this is the stronger performance. That's not giving much credit because they're both kind of bare on the page, and that's not fair to her. But I kind of just felt that I kind of just felt once again really bad for her because she's such a great actress, and I love her work, and I love mostly everything she does, and I just feel like McQueen weirdly kind of wasted her and kind of wasted the chemistry that the two of them have, which we've clearly seen on the press tour that they have, and they have this connection. I just wish that there was a little bit more there. Like maybe somebody else could have come in and punched up McQueen's script to give it a little bit more of that emotional connectivity that is necessary for this to hit by the end of the film. Because it kind of, like you're saying, Josh, it goes back to, it just feels like you've made these big set pieces and you got this kid walking through. Almost feels like, when you're in a video game and you're like walking
Hmm.
around, but you don't have any control over that part of the video games, or you're just sitting there waiting for like the story to catch up.
You're
And
watching the cutscene.
yeah,
Yeah.
the cut scenes or like the live action scenes, you know what I mean? It kind of felt like that at times. And it was a little frustrating because it's Steve McQueen. We should be like talking about this
Yeah.
as the best movie of the year. You know what I
And that's
mean?
the thing. It's like this movie's not
But
bad.
it's not
Like I
bad.
don't
It's
think
just
it's a
like,
terrible movie, but it's so middle of the road to me. Like
like
it
a wasted
feels
exercise.
yeah, like there was potential for this to be really interesting. And I think that's the reason why when I talked about that like nightclub scene, why I like it so much, because that is the moment that does feel like he is pushing it a little bit. It doesn't
Yeah.
feel like it's completely sanitized and safe, and there is this danger that's there, and this more like insidious atmosphere. And I liked that, and I wish more of the movie had that, but it feels like there's there's that, but McQueen also still wants to have this like sentimental core at it. And it's like that's fine if you want to do it, but you gotta like commit to it then. Like if you want this to be this like sentimental tale, then okay, have it be that then. Like really fully go in, push all your chips on that. And I don't think the movie really does that. And
No.
instead it just sort of has no identity at all, or at least a very broadly drawn, bland one.
Yeah, for sure. No, I mean, that's beautifully said, Josh. There's nothing much I can really add to that. Um, I do want to ask you just quickly. I know we're going to do a big award stuff next week, but I do kind of want to talk about it just here. Where does this movie go this year? What is the we are seeing now the Wicked and the Gladiator and the Nosferatu reactions come in, and they are praised out the yin yang for all three of those films. And we have yet to see the probably most likely unabashed, overpraised reactions to A Complete Unknown that'll be dropping here in the next couple of weeks. Like there's too much positivity for like four movies, and I can't wait for actual people to see those movies. But then you kind of figured like they're big films. They've got really big tech players, and you see a movie like Blitz, and it's very handsomely made. But you kind of start feeling that a movie like this, because it's been sort of a tepid response, it could have potentially a tepid response from the Academy, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And I remember people feeling like the comparison that they were bringing up was Empire of Light,
Mm,
and that's
that's
sort of what I
really,
get from
it
this.
really does feel like it's a successor to Empire of Light in terms of quality and in terms of story. And you're right, probably in terms of awards
Yeah.
placement.
And I think at the moment, I actually also only have Blitz getting one nomination right now.
And that's for,
I think it's for costume design
okay.
because
Yeah.
it's Jacqueline Duran,
Yeah.
who, previous
I
Oscar
mean,
winner. She's popular with the branch. I
it's
could see
Jacqueline
that.
Durant. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, sort of the same way with Empire of Light. Like, it got nominated for cinematography because it's Roger Deakins. So
Yeah.
I feel like but I think that's like the only thing going for it, honestly. I don't think it's a strong enough movie to make it into those other categories. And I know that there are people that are somewhat passionate about it, but I don't think they're in enough numbers for it
Mhm.
to get like all those number ones to squeak into Best Picture, for instance.
Yeah. I mean, it does feel like the movie that could be the sacrificial lamb and the one that falls off. I do, I know that Warner Brothers is petitioned and seems like they're going to try their damnedest to get Hans Zimmer into original score for Doom Part 2. I kind of feel like I feel like this is better work. And would be probably if they do end up putting it ineligible, then I could potentially see that as well, Josh.
We'll
I
probably make the short list, I can
Yeah,
imagine.
I think Nicholas Britell and the song will make the short list for Winter's Coat. Which
Which another one that's like,
yeah, I mean, we don't know what that
it's
category is
fine.
going to be like, and
Yeah.
it's a very fine song. If Diane Warren would have written it, it would have like been easily to be able to predict. We
Well,
just don't
she's
know.
got a song this year anyway, so we
Yeah,
already
no,
know what
we already know
spot
that
is filled.
that's
Yeah.
taken, and we don't know how
Every
many they're
original
going to take
song
from them.
race,
Yeah,
yeah, every original song race is really just about predicting four movies, not five, because we already know one of them will be Diane Warren, so it's really
yeah,
just predicting the other four.
for sure. But also, we don't know how many they're going to take if they just take one or two from Amelia Perez. I feel like they're going to take just one. And if that's the case, then that leaves it vulnerable there, or leaves the spot open
Yeah.
for Blitz to get. I could see like a 2 to 4 nomination because I mean, like Saoirse is there, and she is in a part of like this really weak supporting actress race that's open this year.
Yeah.
If she doesn't get in for the outrun, which is a very competitive race, she could squeak in there maybe at like a last second spot. But I mean, like that would be like costume design, score, song, Ronan, picture. That's like the most random five I think I would have
Yeah.
seen in a very long time. So it's more likely feeling like it's not going to be in the picture race. But old people at the festivals, they really liked it. Like
Yeah,
it
it does
feels
have a
very much.
contingent.
It'll be interesting because it's in theaters now, and then it's going to be on Apple. Does it disappear? Do they push a campaign for it? Remains to be kind of seen, Josh.
Well, is this
But
their only thing, Apple?
it is their only thing. Like it is their
Yeah.
only, like they don't have, because like they have, don't they? Do they have High and Low with Spike coming out next year?
I think,
Or
yeah, they do.
so like they have that, but like yeah, it's coming out next year.
Yeah,
It's not coming
that's
this year.
next
Yeah.
year.
So like they don't have really anything unless it's not like Fly Me to the Moon's doing anything. So or some of their other crap that they've had. So it I think that this would be their only player, but again, it's it seems like it's like in the 8 to 15 range for picture.
Sure. I mean, I would still say like it's in the mix,
Oh, it's in the
but
mix. I wouldn't
yeah.
put I would be very hesitant on picking it because, like you mentioned, its placement right now would be it's not like production design's probably not going to get there.
No.
Cinematography, no. Editing, no. Director, no. Screenwriting, no.
No.
Supporting actors, maybe supporting actress, they're not going to nominate the kid. So it's,
No, even though Best Actor is thin, I don't think
no.
it's thin enough for
So
him
not
to get
not
into that
and he's
lineup.
not getting enough praise for it. Like he's
Yeah,
not getting like
true.
prizes and stuff. So um maybe sound, because the sound work
Yeah.
is big in the film too. So we're talking ourselves up to about 5 to 6 now. It seems like from our starting at 2. I'm talking it up. I'm talking it up. But
I mean, they're all
there are
possibilities for sure.
possibilities.
Anything is a
Yeah,
possibility,
it'll
but
show up on the short list because he works with these extraordinary, well loved talents.
yeah,
So
but also like Hans Zimmer showing up on a original score short list like means nothing.
no, it does. No, it doesn't. But if this one's the only one and Dune isn't, then that tells you
Yeah,
like that could happen, Josh.
it could. Off my
Well,
conversation we'll have about Hans Zimmer because I have feelings about him.
I gotcha. I gotcha. Blitz is in theaters right now. It'll be on Apple TV Plus at the end of the month, and everybody can watch it over the Thanksgiving holiday.
Yeah.
And
And actually, last thing, just to mention, worst thing about the movie, barely any Harris Dickinson.
yeah,
Unforgivable.
well, he's going to be in.
I know, but
He'll be in Baby Girl.
I
We're going
want
to get
as
plenty
much
of that
Harris
boy.
Dickinson as I can get.
That's fair. He just is very wasted
Yeah.
in this movie. Not like drunk, but just like wasted in terms of opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I still, controversial opinion.
Mm.
I still need to see it from him. Like I still need to get it. And I've heard Baby Girl might be that for me.
I think for me, there has been plenty of
Well, beyond
that I have seen. No. I'm serious.
like in terms of like in performances.
I think that he is great in Beach Rats. I think that's a
Okay.
fantastic performance. I don't really care for Triangle of Sadness, but I think he is absolutely hilarious in that film. Like that scene when he's at the elevator explaining about the money, I think is incredible. Like I think the writing is like kind of whatever, but I think the way that he sells it is just immaculate. So I even outside of the very superficial things that I like about Harris Dickinson, I do think he's a very talented actor.
I did really like him in Iron Claw, but I still am waiting.
Yes.
I'm
Very
still
good in Iron
waiting,
Claw.
and I think based off the trailer for Baby Girl, I think that that's a performance I could. I mean, it's right up our alley, Josh.
I
But
mean, I'm like guarding myself right now after watching that trailer. It's like, oh boy.
I watched it again last night, and before the movie that we're about to talk about, Heretic, and I saw it, and I went, "Wow, that'll be an experience.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see that." I have a screening for that coming up here, and
Yeah, so do I.
Josh and I will be texting each other back and forth about our thoughts on that. Moving over to Heretic, A24's latest horror film thriller. How would you describe it, Josh? I guess a thriller.
You know what? I know people have been saying like, "Oh, it's not really a horror movie." I get that, but it's also like not a horror movie either.
It's a
it
psychological
has some
horror
tropes.
film. Yeah, for sure.
Like to me, it's sort of in the same vein of when people get mad that you call Silence of the Lambs like not a horror movie. Sure, it's more of a thriller, but it also indulges in horror movie tropes and setups that I don't think you would be wrong to call it a horror film either.
Yeah, it's a movie written and directed by Scott Beck and Brian Woods. They were sort of the team that co-wrote with Krasinski the story for A Quiet Place in
Hmm.
2018, and this is them sort of cashing in all their chips, and it's
Oh, you
about
don't think 65 was them cash all their
oh,
chips?
65.
Movie I still have not seen, so I cannot judge its
Yeah,
quality.
I
So
cannot judge 65 all the way on that one, but maybe I'll watch 65 tonight.
it
Probably not.
it does look like a dumb fun movie, but I
Yeah,
can't say for sure because I haven't
I
seen it.
mean, yeah, I guess so. I guess that would be cashing in. That and this seems like they're cashing
Yeah,
in all their chips. Is that better? Is that
sure.
can I
Yes,
say
you have
like
to
that
include 65 in there.
they got the double punch of that? Oh yeah, I have seen 65. The Driver
Well,
movie.
it left an impression, I
Yeah,
see.
it left a 2-star impression. It was not a
Yeah,
very, you know what? I saw it on a plane, and that's the perfect place to watch 65
very much felt like a plane
on a
movie.
plane movie. Um, really, what a weird movie. Anyway, it's by Beck and Woods, and it's about two Mormon missionaries who attempt to convert a reclusive Englishman in his house, and he goes and that's all I really want to say about it. Don't want. We'll talk about more with it here. A24 once again has 900 films out this
Yeah.
year, and I can't wait for those screeners to come in because Lord knows it's a hefty load every year of just screeners and mailers and all these
We talking
different
about
things.
Heretic or Queer with
No,
Heffernan?
oh, there we go. That a boy, Josh. Set you up there for that one. But anyway, it's it did pretty well this past weekend. Horror has been doing really well this year, Josh. It
It
is
usually
the
does.
it
Yeah.
usually does, but it feels like this has been a really strong year for horror. And this movie got really great reviews out of Toronto. It then had even more of a resurgence and premiere over at AFI recently before its release. So it's done really well. Audiences really seem to connect with it. Uh, you saw it this past week, and I'm kind of curious from your perspective what you think about this movie.
I liked this movie. And in fact, in the beginning, I was close to loving it. I think that the film sets up a really great atmosphere that's so just filled with tension and anxiety. And I liked that. And I liked how, for much of like the first half of this movie, it's really just about three characters having a conversation, or
Hmm.
more like actually Hugh Grant monologuing at these two women. But even still, like so captivating in terms of the subjects that they're exploring, like this idea of how much you really want to give over to religion and how much you really believe in that. And I found all of that to be really, really fascinating. I think the second half is where it kind of loses me a little bit, where it feels like the scope then opens up just a little bit more. And to me, it does sort of feel like that's the moment where the writers are like, we have this really great premise, but we kind of don't know how to get out of this premise. And so it starts to do things I felt were not dumb, but just not as interesting as what they were doing before. And it did kind of devolve a little bit as we started to move through the story and getting to what it was actually about. They kind of arrive at very obvious conclusions, and just wasn't as impactful for me. And I was still entertained by it. I do think the performances from all three of these actors are great. I am in love with this new era of Hugh Grant's career, where he's just basically a character actor. I think it's actually the most exciting phase of his career. So
Hmm.
there's good things about it, but I do think halfway it kind of loses the plot a little bit, and it didn't land as strong as it started. But I still enjoyed the movie overall.
I think that this is a really good movie until it had to explain itself at the end.
Yeah,
And I think that, listen, as somebody who in 20, I guess it was 2020, gave Hugh Grant his personal best supporting actor for The Gentleman,
he was on my ballot that year.
and also nominated him in 2018 for obviously his work in Paddington 2.
Yep, same.
I can tell you that this man has no doubtly been on a run, like Josh said, consistently delivering fantastic performances over the last 5 to 6 years as a character actor. He might, once again, Josh, have put himself in a situation where he's on my personal ballot, at least in the short list for supporting actor again, because he's incredible in this movie. There is a monologue in the middle of this movie. We kind of get a hint of it in the trailer, but we
Yeah.
get to see the fullness of this monologue, and he is just delivering very interesting, but also extremely hilarious moments. There's a moment in particular where he mimics a very well-known character, I will
Did
say.
not expect to see that.
Didn't expect
That
to see
was
it, and thought it might be one of the best moments of the year. And I was um, I was shocked how much I was like, I am so into this movie. And it does a really great job, kind of like A Quiet Place, of being very claustrophobic. I think this movie does a great job of building its tone. But the problem is that this is a movie about religion. And not necessarily the Mormon religion, though that is the religion sort of put at the forefront of Grant's argument and these two girls who are missionaries. But it puts religion up at the forefront in sort of a conversation about faith overall. And it's a very interesting things that are brought to the table. The word iterations is used a lot. And I think
Mhm.
that way in which they argue about it, or at least Grant presents his argument, is deeply fascinating. But when it is revealed what this whole thing is led up to, it leads down a very generic sort of summation of how this plot is going to present itself. And for that, I um I was a bit disappointed by, because I thought the movie was at times, like you're saying, Josh, it kind of felt like it was better than doing that. And I think that as it's laid on, I still think the heaviness of these performances, Grant having such a wonderful time playing this character, um, that is why I'm very positive on it, and I had a great time with it. But the end of this movie is ridiculous and stupid. And I was just rolling my eyes at it, the way it sort of resolves itself, and it's very heavy-handedness. And so it kind of felt like Beck and Woods sort of both of their worlds colliding, because for the most part, the tension and everything built up like in A Quiet Place is really great. But then there's the dumbassery and forgettableness of 65.
Yeah.
And you're kind of like, these two have really great ideas and they're not able to just maybe make it even meaner, or make it uh, uh have ambiguity, or allow the audience to feel like maybe they're a little bit behind, or not as, the movie kind of spoon feeds an ending to the audience that I didn't really care for. But I still think that there's so much interesting things in it that I can't not recommend it to people. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like I still think it's a good movie, and I think
Yeah.
particularly that first
Am I
half is
being too
so
negative this
strong.
week? I feel like I'm being a
Well, I think you'd have just cause to feel that way. But I do feel like that movie starts off so well, and like I am interested in those conversations, but there is still an aura of tension. There's a moment at the beginning of the film that involves a statue in shadow that I thought was extremely well done. Very
Oh
like kind of
man.
scared me to be honest, like because it's just so natural how that moment plays out. So
Mm.
there's great filmmaking in here and there's great performances, but yeah, I do think once we start arriving at the resolution, it does just feel like, yeah, it's generic. I think it also has a problem where it now suddenly introduces way more questions that I don't think we should be thinking about in terms of like the logistics of what's happening and the practicality of how he's doing all of this. Like it, and I understand like it's a movie and you can kind of go with it on some level, but there for a film that is also asking you to like engage in critical thinking with every single subject that comes up in your mind, once you start doing stupid things, then it's like, well, how is somebody this smart doing something like this? It doesn't make any sense. And it only highlights that issue when you've done such a good job of establishing that you should be looking at things critically up until that point. So it definitely does not end very strongly for me. I think that it's even trying to go for a sense of ambiguity that it completely fails at because of the way that that scene is edited. It really only leads you to one conclusion, in my opinion. So, but I did enjoy it. I enjoyed my time. It's a good movie. I just think that it kind of just, loses it a bit at the end. But overall, an engaging piece of work.
Yeah, for sure. I had a lot of fun with it. I mean, you know, easily one of the better uses of a Radiohead song in movie because goddamn, people don't know how to use their music in movies. I'm looking at you, Denis Villeneuve. People don't know how to use Radiohead properly, and this was done in a fun, sort of campy way. And that's just where Grant has. I can't say enough about Hugh Grant, and also too. I mean, Sophie Thatcher is really great, but Chloe East once
Yeah.
again really great. Gotta say, one of the silliest, dumbest cameos I've seen in quite some time with Topher Grace in this movie. Not really necessary. Kind of felt like, again, kind of the problem with the movie is she's presenting too many ideas um and MacGuffins and things, and you're not fully exploring
Yeah.
them. And um, but man, Grant is so good in this movie, and that's like the great thing about a movie like this, and that A24 has just been able to do, and these horror films have been able to do lately, is just have these great one-off showcases for these great actors that we love. And I've loved Grant for a long, long time. And he's kind of gone away from just being like a movie star in the rom-com era to now he's a character actor and he's doing these really interesting things. And yeah, when people just give him monologues, he's going now and he's able to just
Yeah.
carry scenes. And it's worth the price of admission alone just to watch him sort of spin this yarn while these two girls are deeply horrified, and effectively then we are horrified.
Yeah.
I will say that this has one of the more manipulative trailers of the year because I expected this to be a puzzle box movie and be more. It felt like they were trying to present it as a big trap. You know what I mean? Not,
Yeah, like figure
not
your way out of
Yeah,
which
like
I mean it
not like a
is,
Saw
but
movie, not as bloody as a Saw movie, but also not as silly as M. Night Shyamalan's Trap, but definitely like
like
sort of almost
intellectual puzzles to figure out, and there's
yes, and
not really that happening
exactly.
right
That's what
now.
I kind of figured, and that's where it kept my claustrophobia up with the film. Was like, okay, they're about to do these really theological tests to determine their faith, but also escape. And when the film then presents that that is not what is actually going to happen here, then that is a bit disappointing as well too. Because then what is the point of choice at that point? There is no choice at that point then. So
Which is a
that
commentary the movie is bringing in, but I just think the execution of that exploration is a little subpar.
I just think it's a great lead up, and then it's just like, damn it, if you would have actually gone that way, it would have
Yeah.
been. It's not like I need them to like have their hands in a trap or lose their fingers or things of that nature. I don't want it to turn into body horror. But I do think it could be vastly interesting. What is it? I mean, because like the whole thing is about this wooden contraption in the box and everything that they've kind of hinted at, right? And then you see it in the film, and you're like, damn it, seems like they wanted to go there, but they didn't fully commit to going there, and
Yeah.
that's a little bit of a problem with the film. But um, yeah, I mean, like we're not going to talk about Oscar chances for this thing. It doesn't have any. But
No,
no,
I don't think so. I
no,
know some people
but
have been saying like maybe Hugh Grant in supporting actor, maybe original screenplay, but I don't
no. I
really
mean, come
see
on,
it.
he couldn't even get in for Paddington. So like, what are we talking about here? I mean, that's not going to happen. It just made,
No.
but I hope he keeps making things, and I do hope in the future that somebody does give him a role potentially that he can get into an awards race, because I do think that I mean, he is a little prickly, but he's also extremely funny and very cheeky, and um, I I just think he's great, and he's been consistently
Yeah.
great over the last
I
couple of
mean, he
years.
almost got nominated for Florence Foster Jenkins. Like
Yes, he did.
that did almost happen.
It would have been a terrible nomination,
I
but because
mean,
it's a bad
sure.
movie. But um,
I mean, but he's fine in the
he's
movie.
actually he's one of the good things in it. Again, which is saying something, because you're acting opposite Meryl
Yeah.
Streep, and it's one of Meryl's worst
Yeah. But
nominations
no,
for
he
sure.
should have been in there for Paddington too. He should have been in there for The Gentleman, which The Gentleman, by the way, a movie I'm pretty sure is my parents' favorite film. It is always on the
Is it
television whenever
Josh
I'm home
Parham's
late.
favorite movie? Because it's Hugh Grant hitting on Charlie Hunnam the entire time. It's
There
it
is
might.
that,
I'm
yeah.
just gonna say, like, that's not a bad movie night for you,
And
Josh.
Charlie Hunnam in his native British accent is always the best because I've never seen somebody have a more terrible American accent than him, which is weird because he was on a TV show where he played American for years and yet his accent is terrible. I
His
never
accent,
understand.
yeah, his accent's
But when
awful.
he's English, great, love it.
Absolutely. Well, Heretic is in theaters. Go check it out. I think you guys would really have a fun time with it. It's a fun time.
Yeah, it's a good
Yeah.
movie.
Buy some buy some candy and some popcorn and go watch that. Save Blitz for at home. Um, well, Josh, that's gonna be it. That's it. We're only doing that. You okay with that?
I mean, no just elongated tangents or anything like that. No,
I
we're
was
just
very
keeping it.
forward. I was, well, do you want a tangent?
I mean, I just always assume you're going to bring up one, so I just buckle in.
Hey, that's fair. Um, no, I think we're good this week. I'm gonna leave it tangent free. Just wanted to review some films and give a nice podcast for everybody to listen to as they start their week. Next week we're gonna have tons of tangents probably, because we're gonna come back and we're gonna talk about where we're at with the Oscar race and do a
Yeah.
big sort of look into it.
This
But
was a
Josh,
decompression week for sure.
yeah,
It's
it's big
like
decompression, and but we'll be back to my normal silliness next week, and Josh will be telling me to uh, cut it out. Josh is actually my parent on these shows, and I don't, I have to behave around him. Josh, can you tell everybody where they can find you and all your work on the internet?
well, currently you can still find me on Twitter. We'll see how long
That's okay.
that lasts.
You want to have that conversation? I don't know how much longer I'm going to be on that app,
Yeah.
and it might also be just good for my mental health and for everybody's. But then also, you guys do some really funny stuff out there on the internet,
Yeah, that's
and
the thing.
I
It's
keep getting
like
sucked back in there. Plus,
so
also,
I'm
there's really good looking photos and stuff.
there is that too.
It's good.
So that's why I
It's
don't
like
know if I
Josh,
will.
Josh and I send stuff back and forth, and we're just like, I don't know if we can get rid of this. It's like,
I mean, when Brandon Perea is posting pictures on Twitter, like it's
don't
like, man, I can't fully
he
leave.
can't
So
do this. He can't. What is
yeah,
this man doing?
so you can still find me there. I don't know how active I'll be on it going forward, but you can still find me there. You can find me also on Letterboxd, and I'll even do the Blue Sky now because I feel like that's what we're doing. All those places at JR Parham, and you can find my work over at Next Best Picture and Awards Watch.
Blue Sky, Twitter, Instagram, Letterbox, all the same. Ryan McQuade 77. It's kind of amazing that I've been able to get them all. It's like collecting them like Infinity Stones. Um, you can find all my work here at awardswatch.com. If you like podcasts, Director Watch. Speaking of tangents,
Really, yeah.
oh my
It's like half the
God,
show over at Director's Watch.
this past week was complete. I don't know if you listened to it, Josh, when we did the double life of Veronique for our Kieslowski movie series. It was balancing that review with pretty much every thought that Jay had about going on this Disney cruise. And I
The
highly
perfect
recommend.
match, yes.
I mean, yes. I mean, talk about, the duality of these two girls' lives intersecting with the duality of normal life and going on a Disney cruise. Like, I feel like
Yes.
that's what the listeners asked for, and we delivered. And this week we'll be talking about Three Colors Blue, which I'm very excited to talk about. And I think it's the first time watch for Jay. And we have a special guest that'll be on with us for that episode. So looking forward to that. And continuing that series. We'll be back obviously next week here, and we might have another show in between. Who knows? There's too many podcasts, but you can go over to the website, sign up for the newsletter, and it's a great place to get all of our podcast interviews, reviews, just all the festival news, all the nominations that are going to be happening, all the critics stuff that's going to be happening. Josh is in critics groups. I'm in critics groups. Everything's going to be starting to come left and right. I mean, Josh, you're going to have mailers and screeners at the Yin Yang. Just make sure that you, that make sure that those boxes are kept safe because, people can steal boxes. But
I need that neon package. That's always number one.
Is this your first time? Is this your first one?
No, I've gotten them before, but it's always the thing I'm looking forward to the most because it's such nice packaging.
Well, it wasn't 2 years ago. I thought the one 2 years ago was a bit. They were pinching the pennies. The one where it was the individual sort of disc in there.
Yeah.
And then they went back to an actual booklet last year, and they must have heard me bitching and moaning about that. But
look, I'm not going to complain that much.
What a problem to have, folks.
Exactly.
But yeah, that's the one that we all want. That's
the one where the pictures get posted of like, oh, this came in.
So, yeah, that's where everyone starts to brag. You know what I mean? I just got a box this week for Inside Out 2. And it's the most, see, you're getting a tangent. It's the most, I don't know what to do with it. It's a bunch of candy but can I say one thing? I'm really pissed at them, at Disney. Why did you give me a DVD? Like they gave me go to wherever you buy physical media. They gave me a DVD. When they have given out for Lightyear and Elemental Blu-rays, it didn't make any sense. So Disney, come on, don't go cheap on me now. Like I know that you gave me all this candy and stuff
like $1 billion.
It didn't just make $1 billion. It made like $2 billion. Like you can't put a Blu-ray in there.
Maybe they figured you're just gonna watch it on Disney Plus anyway. So
I don't have Disney Plus. I refuse to.
That's just their mentality.
Now they know that too, and they're gonna get mad. They're gonna get really mad. Anyway, 5 stars on iTunes and Spotify. Greatly appreciate it. And we'll be back next week. We're gonna talk. I almost said next year. We'll be back next year. We'll be back next week. We're gonna try to get most of the team together, and we're gonna talk about the state of the Oscars and where we're seeing everything because it still feels. Even right now, Josh, just to tease it, feels very open. Everything seems very open.
It does.
But then
I'm not moved from my number one, though, which oddly, I still kind of feel like, even given recent events, might actually embolden it a little bit. So
I have no idea what I'm starting to look at it, and I feel like every time I put something in my number one spot, I have doubt. As Meryl Streep would say, I have doubt.
Yeah.
So
might be related to the movie I put at number one, right?
You see what I did there. Yeah. We'll talk about it all next week. So thank you all so much for listening, and we'll see you all next time.